Really start by first really taking a nod to Nisa Shaw. So Sleep Organic is really the brainchild of Nisa. So she and I together co-formed Sleep Organic, and it's a company wholly dedicated to ethically sourced organic bed linen. And in this talk, I hope to emphasize the importance and the benefits of going organic right across the supply chain to the various operations. So a little bit about my own background. So I have a long history of top-level research in the biomedical field. But in 2018, I decided to leave the relative security of a faculty position in Oxford University to devote myself full-time to Sleep Organic. And I did that because I believe that there is an urgent need to radically change the way we do business, the way we consume. And I think it's no exaggeration anymore to say our survival as a species depends on this. So that's my motivation for the work I do with Sleep Organic and my motivation for talking to you today. So next slide, please, Anna. Great, so I just realized I hadn't got my webcam on. I hope that's working now. So I'd like to emphasize and explain a little bit about a systems thinking approach. And then I'm going to ask you for the rest of the talk to try and view everything I say through a systems thinking lens. So what is a system? Well, we know it's an entity, but it's characterized by its interrelated and interdependent parts. And they're key characteristics I want you to bear in mind. Now, different systems overlap, as you can see in the diagram. And what that means is that one system itself may be part or a subsystem of a larger system. And these complex arrangements are typically non-linear. They involve feedback loops, and critically, they often involve delays, and I'll come back to that point. So it requires an interdisciplinary, they're so complex that the study and understanding of them itself requires an interdisciplinary approach, collaborative approach on a global level, and an integrated approach, because you have to, after all, at the end, join up the dots and make sense of this. Now, this more comprehensive systems thinking approach just matter-of-factly describes more accurately actually how things are, the reality of how complex things are. It also allows you to predict how they will be with and without intervention. So if you look at the diagram on the bottom right, the three circles, ecosystems, social systems, and economic systems, this green hatched area, this is the area of critical interdependence. So this would be the area to focus our attention on, because here we can impact all three systems. But it's important to remember that it's a two-way street. So, for example, current economic practices are often negatively affecting the ecosystem, but that feeds back. We can't just live in isolation and say, oh, well, that's too bad, it's not my problem, because the ecosystem feeds back and can negatively then influence the economic system. So basically, this green hatched area you're seeing here, the area of the current climate change crisis actually operates in this area. So this would be the important area to focus on, because remember, it's a two-way street. So instead of working to mutual detriment, we can change the system, the economic system, so we get mutual benefit. Now, applying this to systems thinking approach across the entire supply chain, critical methodology can be used to uncover the hidden impacts, the so-called externalized impacts. Now, these can be costs or benefits, and this is critical because, in my opinion, if we truly want to move towards sustainability, we need to uncover the true cost and then ultimately have that reflected in a fair price that reflects that true cost. Next slide, please, Anna. Next slide, Anna. Yeah, great, thanks. So why is organic the sustainable choice? Now I'm going to be concentrating on organic cotton. Cotton is in the UK, over half the clothes are made from cotton, and we use our organic bed linen predominantly from cotton. So the first point, and this is the first point in the supply chain, that it strengthens that. So it improves the health and livelihood of farmers. Now, I don't have time to go into the details, but there's multiple reasons for this. So the first, in organic farming, there's no toxic pesticides used. So there's already the health of the farmers improved there. It enhances food security, while conventional farming, you would just have a monoculture and it's a cash crop, no food. But in organic farming, and it decreases the risk, you'd have crop rotation, or you'd have food crops grown alongside. And that creates food for the farmer in times of crisis, as we're seeing right now. So there's, again, a greater sustainability for the farmers themselves, the start of the supply chain. And then thirdly, And a lot of these farmers are in developing countries where there's a lot of poverty, and this prevents indebtedness. Why? Because the farmer is no GM crops, I should say, no GM seeds allowed in organic farming. So, and these are quite costly. So the farmer doesn't have to buy GM seeds, doesn't have to buy pesticides, and doesn't use synthetic fertilizers. So there's three major costs which are off farm that are avoided in organic farming. And this really helps to make more stable and more robust the very start of that supply chain with the farmers. And we work with large cooperatives, and we work intimately with them, and I can maybe refer to more details in questions. So next, Anna. So now there's some huge benefits of going organic in terms of farming and the supply chain and greenhouse gas emissions. So different independent research has shown that up to 94% less greenhouse gas emissions from organic compared to conventional farming. One of the major reasons it eliminates the use of fossil fuel derived nitrogen-based fertilizers. So basically your synthetic fertilizer is produced by taking nitrogen and using natural oil in a very energy intensive process. Hydrogen ions are ripped off that natural gas are ripped off that, combined with the nitrogen, and there you have ammonia, NH3. Great, but the only downside is it's very energy intensive, and it releases huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. Now it gets worse because the very high levels of nitrogen in the soil tend to ruin that soil biodiversity. The soil tends to compact, it can no longer hold water, and therefore it requires more irrigation, more watering, but also the nitrogen, where does it go? So most of the nitrogen that's added doesn't stay in the soil. It leaches in as nitrates, polluting the water, or released into the atmosphere as nitric oxide, incredibly potent greenhouse gas. So you see the multiple effects of conventional farming. All of that is eliminated with organic farming. So we've wiped that out in one swipe. Now, the second point then is organic farming tends to turn the soils into a carbon sink by the organic composting and the crops. Next, Anna, please. So another major fact, and this 91% less water that organic farming uses in cotton farming compared to conventional methods. This again is verified by several independent peer-reviewed research studies. The main reason is, as I was saying before, that organic farming creates a healthy soil, and that healthy soil can soak up the water and absorb it. So that means that it's better able to cope in times of floods and also droughts. And of course, with the climate change effects happening, this is going to happen more and more often. So this gives an even greater ability to withstand the climate change issues that we're going through. And of course, with less pesticides in there, and less water, there's cost savings in treating the wastewater. So you can see again on the bottom right, the three circles. We're operating in this area of interdependence. We're creating, right at the beginning of the supply chain, creating a more stable, resilient farmer base through organic farming. And next slide, Anna, please. So how can we police this? How can we show traceability? So there is only just one global standard for organic in terms of textiles that operates right across the supply chain. So from the farmer to the finished product, including on-product labeling. So it involves strict criteria, so that environmental and social criteria, and it polices these with third-party audits. And next slide, Anna, our next segment. So the environmental criteria, let's briefly go through them. So there are it's very strictly regulated what you can and can't use. So in conventional textiles, believe it or not, it's okay to add carcinogens. It's okay, it's standard practice, which are 90-something% of cotton textiles. It'll be fixed with formaldehyde, it'll have heavy metal ions. None of that is allowed in the organic processing. And these are strictly controlled, so the laboratory analysis are done, so there's no fudging of this. If it has some of these banned substances, that's it. It's eliminated. You cannot use that and have the guts label. There's also strict control, as we've already alluded to, on wastewater and on energy consumption. And next, Anna. The social criteria as well are also strictly regulated under GOTS certification. So there's no child labor, there's safe working conditions, no discrimination. And in terms of, as Enzo was mentioning, fair trade, so we're also fair trade certified right through the supply chain. And if you're fair trade certified and GOTS certified, fair trade will pay a higher premium, a higher minimum price guarantee, and that's very beneficial in times of price fluctuation, market volatility. And fair trade together with SAI, so our main supplier is also SAI 1000 certified. These are two major players in the global living wage coalition, so they ensure a living wage for the workers, both in the factory and the farmers. Next, please, Anna. So carrying on traceability then to the final product. So the GOTS certification certifies, as I say, right through the supply chain, the various criteria. And then at the end on your product, so this would be on our bedding, you have the GOTS certified logo, the little green jersey there, the certifier in the UK, that's Soil Association, and the license number. So from that license number, the end consumer can then trace on a public database the product right through the supply chain, and you can see everything, for example, that Sleep Organic is producing and to what grade. So in terms of the packaging as well, we try to completely minimize waste. So there's no plastic packaging, but also the packaging, the inner packaging is in the material itself. So the offcuts in the factory that would normally be just discarded from our organic bedding, we get made into inner bags to contain the product. So this really minimizes the waste there, and we've insisted on that from day one. In terms of the actual outer packaging then as well, the certification allows you to put, to label these as well. So these are labeled again with your license number, and for the fair trade, it's the same. You can trace through the flow ID. So next slide, please, Anna. So in terms of transitioning and scaling this, obviously the GOTS is the gold standard, but there are various global platforms, and Textile Exchange is a very important one that can allow more brands, more retailers, more suppliers to access the organic market and to link them up with organic farmers. So the Textile Exchange have created a second certification standard that works in a complementary way to GOTS. What it does is any fabric from 5% up to 100% organic cotton. But what it's doing is it's certifying the cotton at the farmer, and it's tracing that through the supply chain. But it's not assessing environmental or social criteria, but it is confirming that the organic, the cotton was grown organically in the first place, and you get the on-product labeling. And that's a great start. But I think it's getting very urgent, and the urgency is really there to go right through to full organic, right through the supply chain. Again, looking at the top right on our interaction, the green shaded area, these three circles. That's where we'll have maximum impact. That's where we need to get to if the textile industry needs to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. That's where we'll get to develop an economic system that works in a mutually beneficial way with both people and planet. Thank you. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of other questions with regards to people understanding the transparency and the traceability of the directs. In other words, the major ingredients. Is there still the same level of intensity around indirects? Saskia?
Yeah, perhaps I could add to that. So with the GOTS certification, so that all the inputs are regulated. So this would include, for example, on the textiles, the zips, the buttons, but it also would include any accessories that coming in, like new dyes. They would first of all, they'd have to have the material safety sheet, but then that wouldn't be enough. There'd be certain criteria, and laboratory analysis would be done. And then they can pay a small fee, and they can work with GOTS to get certified on that. So all inputs are assessed, and that's just part of that strict criteria. And that really is a nod to why we've gone the certification route, because any company really, no matter how big, cannot afford to be this comprehensive and cover this much. So it's actually a cost saving to subscribe to a certification system. But you're right, there's many certification systems, but the number that are so comprehensive in the textiles, and they go right across the supply chain from environmental conditions and social, are being just one, and that's GOTS. So that's why we certify to them. But we do extra criteria as well in terms of our own actions. So in terms of our packaging, as I alluded to, the offcuts are used to minimize waste. There's a nod to the kind of circular economy. And that's really important for us to have minimal waste. but also in terms of our farmers. So they're a very large cooperative of farmers, and they've organized into self-help groups that then form the smaller cooperatives, bigger cooperatives, right up to national level. So these are over 30,000 farmers, and yet they're all smallholder farmers, just maybe a couple of hectares. So we work also closely with them, and this is where Nisa, co-founder Nisa Shah at Sleep Organic, works very closely with them, and it's about mainly raising awareness. So she would work with local schools in some of the villages to raise awareness about the importance of sustainable farming and organic farming. Because we really need that to be passed on to the next generation. So our approach at Sleep Organic is to raise awareness at both ends of the supply chain, if you like. One is with the farmers, their families, their children, and the other is right with the consumer. So that would be, and that's where the GUTS product labeling helps, but that's just to start the conversation off with a fair trade label. So at trade shows, we'd emphasize through that the importance when they're buying organic, what are they buying into and what are they not buying into in terms of how this material, how this fabric was made. So we tend to work about raising awareness on both ends of the supply chain.
Coming through, and we're trying to cram a couple in before we have to close. With regards to the difficulty of collecting this data, how do you initiate and how do you get people to fill all this data in? And is there a huge cost associated with it? Obviously, people are trying to start this journey. Can you give any insight, either Chris or Saskia? What are the others?
I mean, ours is probably slightly easier because it tends to be streamlined, and that's one of the advantages going the certification route. So we pay our fee for the GUTS certification or the fair trade, but the GUTS have strict criteria. We will see that laboratory analysis of the products, for example, and even to the extent where they've asked us, even as the final retailer, to sometimes double check the laboratory analysis of the products. But there's full auditing there. So in a way that's made simple for us, and that's part of the advantage of the thoroughness and the traceability of the certification route.
Off here, but I have a question here for Chris. It says, you've got a fan here. I love the benefits of organic farming. All the benefits on your slide are no-brainers. So why doesn't all cotton grow organically? You've certainly got a supporter there. A quick question of how to convert everybody.
Yes, I mean, I think some of the initiatives I mentioned at the end are really important, that transition. So opening up the organic market to more and more retailers. But in terms of the actual yields as well, they're getting very close to each other now. So the yields of organic farming are approximating non-organic farming. But I think in the industry, there's always this time lag, this delay, and people are reluctant to go the full route into organic. But really long term, and even if you just consider the economic situation, long term, that is the more viable option for the reasons I've said about the sustainability for the farmers, the supply chain, the quality of the soil. So there's an old saying that synthetic fertilizers are great for the father and poor for the son, because they tend to deplete the soil. And what we are finding with conventional non-organic farming is yields slowly will decrease. What normally happens is that gets a bit fudged with some of the systems because they just move the land and say, well, let's go to another area of land and start to deplete that instead. And it's just not sustainable.
Okay, I think we're probably opening up a brand new topic that has a lot of the audience with a lot of different views on it. So we'll perhaps have to hold that for a different day. But I thank all the speakers for their input. I hope this has been rewarding, and some of the audience has actually got something to look at the websites. They're quite informative. And I wish everybody great success in their own journey of mapping those supply chains. So Anna, over to you.